My name is Samantha Rodriguez, and I'm 28 years old. 8 months ago, I woke up from a coma to find my hospital room empty. No flowers, no cards, no family. The nurses looked at me with pity, whispering about how nobody had visited in months. Then suddenly, like magic, my family appeared with lawyers, expensive bouquets, and crocodile tears streaming down their faces. They thought I was brain dead, but I heard everything during those 8 months, including their plan to pull the plug on my life support. Before we dive into this unbelievable story of betrayal and revenge, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. If you're ready to hear how my own family tried to steal my fortune, smash that like button and subscribe for more shocking true stories. Trust me, what happens next will blow your mind about how money can turn even blood relatives into enemies. The nightmare began on a rainy Tuesday evening last October when I confronted my sister Rebecca about the missing money from our grandmother's inheritance. I discovered she'd been slowly draining the account we were supposed to split equally, using the funds for her lavish lifestyle, while I worked double shifts at my marketing job to pay rent. The argument escalated quickly in the parking lot of her downtown apartment complex. She screamed that I was always the perfect golden child, and that she deserved more because life had been harder for her. In my anger and hurt, I stormed to my car and drove off into the night, tears blurring my vision as I navigated the slick highways. The 18-wheeler came out of nowhere, running a red light and slamming into my driver's side door. The impact sent my Honda Civic spinning across 3 lanes of traffic before it crashed into a concrete barrier. I don't remember the ambulance ride or the emergency surgery that saved my life, but I would later learn every detail from the nurses who witnessed my family's cold response to the tragedy. When the hospital called my emergency contacts, my father William arrived first, followed by my stepmother Diana and brother Tyler. Instead of relief or gratitude that I'd survived, their first concern was the mounting medical bills. Standing in the hallway outside my ICU room, thinking I couldn't hear them through my medically induced coma, they discussed my condition like I was already dead. Diana, with her perfectly manicured nails clicking against her designer purse, calculated the daily costs of my care out loud. She mentioned that my health insurance had limits and that the family savings couldn't sustain long-term care if I remained unconscious indefinitely. My father, the man who'd raised me since childhood, nodded grimly and suggested they should prepare for the worst-case scenario rather than holding on to false hope. Tyler, my younger brother who I'd helped put through college, was even more callous in his assessment of the situation. He researched vegetative state statistics on his phone right there in the hospital corridor, reading aloud that most coma patients who don't wake up within 3 months never recover meaningful brain function. He suggested to our parents that letting nature take its course might be more merciful than forcing me to exist in a diminished state. The family lawyer, Mitchell Harrison, was summoned to discuss the legal and financial implications of long-term care versus end-of-life decisions. My boyfriend Jake, who I'd been dating for 2 years and thought might propose soon, lasted exactly 1 week before he stopped visiting altogether. He told the nurses he couldn't handle seeing me like that and needed to move on with his life since there was no guarantee I'd ever wake up. His abandonment stung deeply, even in my unconscious state, but it was nothing compared to watching my own family systematically erase me from their lives. The only person who showed me genuine kindness during those dark early weeks was Maria Santos, a night shift cleaner who would talk to me while she worked, telling me about her day and encouraging me to fight my way back to consciousness. As the weeks turned into months, my family's visits became shorter and less frequent. By the second month, they'd reduced their appearances to brief check-ins every few days, spending most of their time huddled with hospital administrators discussing transfer options to cheaper facilities. Rebecca came by occasionally, but only to rifle through my personal belongings that friends had brought to the hospital, taking jewelry and items she claimed were family heirlooms that should be preserved. The medical staff grew increasingly uncomfortable with my family's obvious eagerness to move me out of the expensive ICU into long-term care. Dr. Chun, my attending physician, began having difficult conversations with my family about realistic expectations and quality-of-life considerations. He explained that after 6 months in a coma, the chances of meaningful recovery decreased significantly, and that keeping me on life support might be prolonging suffering rather than preserving hope. My family latched onto this medical opinion as validation for their growing desire to end my expensive care. They began researching death with dignity options and consulted with ethics committees about the most compassionate course of action for someone in my condition. Trapped in the prison of my unresponsive body, I experienced the cruelest form of torture imaginable, complete awareness while appearing completely unconscious. My brain had healed enough to process conversations, recognize voices, and understand the gravity of what was happening around me, but my motor functions remained completely paralyzed. I could hear every whispered conversation, every cruel comment, and every calculated decision my family made about my fate. The emotional pain of their betrayal was far worse than any physical trauma from the accident itself. Diana's voice became the soundtrack of my nightmare as she plotted to liquidate my assets before they got tied up in legal complications. She discovered that I owned a small art studio downtown where I'd been building my freelance graphic design business, and she immediately began making calls to real estate agents about putting the property on the market. She justified this by claiming the rental income was needed to offset my medical expenses, but I knew she was lying since my insurance was covering the majority of my care costs at that point. Rebecca's betrayal cut the deepest because we'd once been incredibly close despite our sibling rivalry. She not only moved into my apartment without permission, claiming someone needed to maintain the property, but she systematically went through my belongings and discarded anything she deemed worthless. Photo albums from my college years went into the trash, along with art supplies, books, and sentimental items that held no monetary value but contained my entire emotional history. She kept my expensive electronics, designer clothes, and jewelry, telling people she was preserving Samantha's valuables, while actually selling many items online. The ultimate slap in the face came when Tyler started openly dating Ashley, who had been my closest friend since high school. Ashley knew all my secrets, my dreams, my fears, and my relationship insecurities, yet she moved seamlessly into Tyler's arms while I lay helpless in a hospital bed. They would visit together occasionally, putting on a show of concern while holding hands and making future plans right in front of my motionless body. Tyler would stroke Ashley's hair while discussing their upcoming vacation to Europe, funded partly by money he'd taken from my emergency savings account. Perhaps the most shocking betrayal occurred in November when my family held what they called a celebration of Samantha's life at our local church. They invited friends, extended family, and community members to a service that was essentially a funeral for someone who was still alive. They collected sympathy donations, shared fabricated stories about my peaceful transition, and accepted condolences as if I had actually died. Diana gave a tearful speech about letting go and finding peace in God's plan, while Rebecca shared childhood memories that painted her as the devoted sister who was honoring my legacy. During this macabre performance, they told everyone that I was essentially gone and that they were keeping my body comfortable while accepting reality. The donations collected that day went directly into a family account, not toward my medical care as donors intended. They used my condition to garner sympathy and financial support from our community while simultaneously planning to end my life support. The psychological cruelty of this deception still haunts me, knowing that good people were manipulated into funding my family's comfortable lifestyle during my darkest hour. My family's medical manipulation reached new depths when Diana began bribing hospital staff for favorable reports about my condition. She offered Dr. Stevens, a young resident desperate for money to pay off student loans, monthly payments in exchange for documentation supporting a vegetative state diagnosis that would justify ending life support. Stevens falsified neurological test results and wrote reports describing me as unresponsive to stimuli, when in reality I was becoming more aware each day. This fraudulent medical documentation became the foundation for their legal case to terminate my care. Rebecca's art theft operation expanded as she gained confidence in her impunity. She discovered my portfolio of original paintings and digital artwork stored in my studio and began selling pieces at local galleries under the pretense of being my estate representative. She forged my signature on contracts and kept all the profits, telling buyers that I had passed away and she was fulfilling my final wishes to share my art with the world. Several pieces sold for thousands of dollars, money that should have gone to my medical care, but instead funded Rebecca's new car and luxury apartment upgrade. The final insult came during Thanksgiving when my family gathered in the hospital hallway to share a festive meal they'd brought from home. They laughed, shared jokes, and talked about their holiday plans while I lay unconscious just yards away. Tyler made cruel jokes about having one less mouth to feed at Christmas dinner, while Diana complained about the inconvenience of having to visit me during the holiday season. They discussed their relief that I wouldn't be around to complicate their inheritance of our grandmother's estate, speaking as if my death was a foregone conclusion rather than a tragedy to be prevented. Everything changed on a cold December morning when Nathan crosswalked through my hospital room door like an angel of justice. He was a tall, confident man in his early 30s with a kind of sharp intelligence that radiated from his piercing blue eyes. Nathan introduced himself as the CEO of Digital Fortress Investments, a cryptocurrency trading platform that had exploded in popularity over the past year. He'd been searching for S. Rodriguez for months, following a complex digital trail that had led him to hospitals across 3 states before finally locating me. Nathan explained that during my senior year at Northwestern University, I'd participated in a computer science project involving early cryptocurrency applications. Along with my classmates, I developed a simple Bitcoin trading app as part of our final thesis project. The professor had encouraged us to invest a small amount of real money to test our algorithms, so I'd put in $500 of my graduation gift money, essentially treating it as an expensive learning experience, and then forgetting about it entirely after graduation. What I didn't realize was that my app's algorithm had been incredibly sophisticated for its time, automatically reinvesting profits and diversifying into emerging cryptocurrencies over the years. While I focused on building my graphic design career and dealing with family drama, my forgotten $500 investment had been quietly growing into an astronomical fortune. Nathan pulled out his laptop and showed me transaction records indicating that my digital wallet now contained holdings worth approximately $850 million. The cryptocurrency boom had turned my college experiment into one of the most successful automated trading algorithms in the digital currency space. My app had made incredibly prescient investments in Bitcoin, Ethereum, and several smaller currencies that had experienced massive growth. Nathan's company wanted to acquire my algorithm and integrate it into their commercial platform, but they needed my personal digital signature and biometric confirmation to access the wallet containing my fortune. My family, lurking in the hallway as they always did during business hours, overheard enough of Nathan's conversation with my medical team to understand that something financially significant was happening. Diana pressed her ear against the door while Rebecca pretended to comfort Tyler in the corridor, all of them straining to catch details about cryptocurrency and investment values. When Nathan mentioned the $850 million figure to my neurologist, explaining the urgency of determining my cognitive capacity for legal decisions, my family's entire demeanor shifted instantly. Within hours of Nathan's visit, Diana was frantically researching cryptocurrency values on her smartphone, cross-referencing Bitcoin prices, and trying to understand the magnitude of the fortune they'd stumbled upon. She called her financial advisor, claiming she needed education about digital currency investments for estate planning purposes related to my condition. The advisor explained how cryptocurrency fortunes had created unexpected millionaires and billionaires, often from small initial investments that had been forgotten for years. Rebecca quit her job that very afternoon, telling her boss she had a family emergency that required her full attention. In reality, she'd already begun mentally spending her share of my inheritance, researching luxury real estate and exotic vacation destinations online. She called several high-end car dealerships to inquire about custom orders, telling sales representatives that she was expecting a large inheritance settlement within the next few months. Tyler hired a private investigator to research my complete financial profile, hoping to uncover additional hidden assets beyond the cryptocurrency fortune. He wanted to ensure the family had a comprehensive understanding of my wealth before making any major decisions about my medical care. The investigators' preliminary report revealed my growing art sales, small but profitable stock investments, and the increasing value of my downtown studio property. The transformation in my family's behavior was immediate and dramatic. Suddenly, they established a 24-hour vigil in my room, hiring the most expensive neurologists in the city and demanding cutting-edge treatments to accelerate my recovery. Diana brought in specialists from Johns Hopkins and the Mayo Clinic, sparing no expense in pursuit of my rehabilitation. Rebecca started researching experimental coma treatments and alternative therapies, claiming she'd never give up hope for her beloved sister's recovery. My stepmother began telling nurses about miraculous signs of improvement she claimed to observe during her visits, describing subtle eye movements and hand twitches that she insisted indicated returning consciousness. She documented these fictional improvements in a detailed journal, creating a medical record that would support her narrative of my gradual awakening. Diana hired a celebrity minister to conduct healing prayer sessions in my room, complete with local media coverage about the family's unwavering faith during their darkest hour. The family's sudden transformation into devoted caregivers was a masterclass in manipulation and deception. They staged an elaborate reunion scene for hospital cameras, complete with professional photography and carefully scripted emotional dialogue. William brought childhood photo albums I hadn't seen in years, setting them up around my bedside table while delivering rehearsed speeches about our precious memories and his unconditional love for his daughter. His performance would have been convincing to outside observers who hadn't witnessed his previous callousness about my condition. Rebecca's apology performance was particularly nauseating in its artificial sincerity. She held my limp hand while crying about our unbreakable sister bond and promising to never let money come between us again. She brought my favorite stuffed animal from childhood, a small elephant named Peanuts that I actually found annoying and had thrown away years earlier. Her tearful confession about feeling so guilty for our last argument before the accident was entirely for show, designed to establish herself as the remorseful sister who deserved forgiveness and inclusion in my financial windfall. Tyler's sudden devotion included bringing elaborate flower arrangements to my room every day, researching my supposed favorite varieties online, and spending hundreds of dollars on exotic orchids and imported roses. The irony was that I'd always preferred simple wildflowers, but Tyler had never paid enough attention to know my actual preferences. He brought his guitar to play songs he claimed were meaningful to our relationship, performing elaborate serenades that attracted nurses and other visitors who praised his touching dedication to his unconscious sister. Diana hired Father Rodriguez, a celebrity priest known for his appearances on religious television programs, to conduct weekly healing services in my hospital room. These sessions were carefully orchestrated media events, with professional videographers documenting the family's unwavering faith and hope. Diana gave emotional interviews to local news stations about the power of prayer and family love, positioning herself as the devoted stepmother who refused to give up on her daughter's miraculous recovery. The family created an elaborate social media campaign around my condition, posting daily updates about my progress and requesting prayers from followers around the world. Rebecca managed Instagram and Facebook accounts dedicated to my recovery journey, sharing carefully curated photos that made my unconscious state look peaceful and dignified rather than tragic. They collected thousands of followers and received donations from strangers moved by their story of familial devotion during crisis. Ashley, Tyler's girlfriend and my former best friend, began experiencing genuine guilt about her betrayal as she watched the family's increasingly desperate attempts to control my situation. She started questioning Tyler about his real motivations and noticed discrepancies between his public devotion and his private conversations about inheritance planning. Ashley overheard Diana discussing cognitive capacity evaluations and financial guardianship procedures, raising red flags about the family's true intentions regarding my recovery. Nathan Cross grew increasingly suspicious of my family's sudden involvement in my care after months of obvious neglect. Hospital staff quietly informed him about the dramatic change in my family's behavior, describing how they'd transformed from absent relatives to obsessive advocates overnight. Nathan began documenting this suspicious timeline, recognizing that my family's newfound interest coincided perfectly with his revelation about my cryptocurrency fortune. The family's internal power struggles became increasingly apparent as they disagreed about how to maintain control over my assets while waiting for my recovery. Diana researched legal guardianship procedures, discovering that she could potentially gain control over my financial decisions if I were declared mentally incompetent due to brain trauma. Rebecca consulted estate planning attorneys about protecting family wealth from potential medical debt or tax complications. Tyler's research into traumatic brain injury legal precedents revealed cases where accident victims had been declared mentally incompetent despite physical recovery, allowing family members to manage their financial affairs indefinitely. He shared these findings with Diana, suggesting they could maintain control over my fortune even after I woke up by claiming I lacked the cognitive capacity to make sound financial decisions. Nathan demanded direct access to me for the legal documentation required to access my cryptocurrency wallet, but my family stalled repeatedly, claiming I needed protection from stressful business discussions during my delicate recovery period. They insisted that any legal proceedings should wait until I was fully rehabilitated and could participate meaningfully in complex financial decisions. Their delays raised Nathan's suspicions about their true motivations. Rebecca began forging medical documents to support claims about my cognitive limitations, working with corrupted medical staff to create false records of confusion, memory loss, and impaired judgment. These fabricated reports would provide legal justification for maintaining family control over my assets regardless of my physical recovery. The fraudulent documentation painted a picture of someone who had survived the accident but lost the mental capacity to manage complex financial affairs. As my neurological functions gradually returned to normal, I faced the terrifying realization that I needed to appear weaker than I actually was to protect myself from my family's schemes. My motor control had improved significantly, and I could feel sensation returning to my extremities, but I carefully concealed these improvements to avoid triggering their next phase of manipulation. I'd overheard enough of their conversations to understand that my recovery would accelerate their timeline for gaining legal control over my assets. My family celebrated my first visible signs of consciousness with public fanfare, while privately discussing strategies to maintain control over my decision-making capabilities. They hired Dr. Stevens, the corrupt neurologist Diana had been bribing, to conduct cognitive evaluations that would support claims of mental incompetence despite my physical recovery. Stevens designed tests intended to make me appear confused and disoriented, documenting false results that painted a picture of severe cognitive impairment. Rebecca researched legal precedents for declaring accident victims mentally incompetent due to traumatic brain injury, finding cases where families had successfully gained permanent guardianship over relatives with significant assets. She consulted with several attorneys about the process for obtaining legal guardianship, presenting my situation as a tragic case of a young woman who needed family protection from financial predators who might exploit her diminished mental capacity. Tyler's manipulation of Ashley intensified as he realized her growing suspicions posed a threat to their plans. He proposed to her during one of their hospital visits, presenting an elaborate engagement ring and promising a luxurious future funded by his share of my inheritance. When Ashley expressed concerns about the ethics of planning their future around my tragedy, Tyler became manipulative and threatening, suggesting that her loyalty to our friendship was interfering with their relationship. Diana escalated her bribery of medical staff, offering substantial payments to nurses and doctors who would support documentation of my cognitive limitations. She found several financially desperate hospital employees willing to falsify records in exchange for cash payments, creating a network of corrupted staff who would testify about my confusion and inability to make rational decisions. This fraudulent medical evidence would be crucial for their guardianship petition. Nathan's frustration with my family's interference led him to hire private investigator Marcus Webb to research their financial background and motivations. Webb's preliminary investigation revealed a pattern of financial irregularities in my family's past, including previous fraud charges against Williams' construction business and suspicious insurance claims filed by Diana after minor accidents. This evidence suggested my family had a history of financial manipulation and opportunism. The family staged several incidents designed to make me appear mentally unstable and incapable of rational decision-making. During visits, when medical staff were present, they would ask me confusing questions and then claim my responses demonstrated cognitive impairment. Rebecca would show me photos of strangers and insist they were close family friends, then express concern when I didn't recognize them, creating false evidence of memory problems. Ashley's guilt finally overcame her loyalty to Tyler when she discovered his research into mental incompetence laws and guardianship procedures. She realized that my family wasn't planning to care for me after my recovery, but rather to exploit my vulnerability for financial gain. Ashley began secretly recording Tyler's conversations about inheritance planning and guardianship strategies, gathering evidence of their manipulative intentions. Dr. Peterson, an ethical physician who'd been observing my care, became increasingly suspicious of the discrepancies between my actual neurological improvement and the negative reports being filed by Dr. Stevens. Peterson conducted independent evaluations that contradicted Stevens' findings, documenting evidence that I was recovering much more successfully than the official medical records indicated. His observations threatened to expose the family's fraudulent documentation scheme. Maria Santos, the night shift cleaner who'd been kind to me throughout my coma, began documenting the family's suspicious conversations she'd overheard during her evening rounds. She kept detailed notes about their discussions of inheritance planning, guardianship strategies, and financial manipulation, creating a record of their true intentions that contradicted their public image as devoted relatives. Nathan filed a formal legal challenge to my family's guardianship petition, arguing that they lacked standing to make financial decisions on my behalf given their demonstrated neglect during my coma. His attorney presented evidence of the family's abandonment during my crisis period, contrasting it with their sudden interest following the revelation of my cryptocurrency fortune. This legal challenge forced my family to defend their motivations and timeline publicly. Rebecca panicked when she learned about Nathan's legal challenge and began destroying evidence of her art theft and asset manipulation. She attempted to return some stolen items to my apartment and studio, trying to cover up her systematic looting of my possessions during my unconsciousness. However, gallery records and online sales documentation had already created an irreversible paper trail of her criminal activity. My communication breakthrough came through developing a subtle eye movement system with Maria during her late-night cleaning shifts when my family wasn't present to monitor my interactions. Maria had noticed that my eyes seemed to track her movements and respond to questions with deliberate blinks, suggesting much higher cognitive function than my family claimed. We established a basic code where one blink meant yes, two blinks meant no, and sustained eye contact indicated urgency or distress about the topic being discussed. Through this painstaking communication method, I was able to convey to Maria that I was fully aware and needed help exposing my family's deception. Maria, despite her limited education, understood the gravity of the situation and began documenting everything she witnessed during her shifts. She kept a detailed notebook hidden in her cleaning supplies, recording conversations she overheard and noting discrepancies between my actual responses and the reports my family filed with medical staff. Ashley's moral awakening accelerated when Tyler became increasingly aggressive about her questioning their plans. During a heated argument in the hospital parking garage, Tyler admitted that he viewed my recovery as a potential obstacle to accessing my inheritance rather than a cause for celebration. Ashley secretly recorded this conversation on her smartphone, capturing Tyler's admission that the family had been planning to manage Samantha's assets, regardless of my cognitive recovery. Nathan's private investigator, Marcus Webb, uncovered shocking evidence about my family's financial history that explained their desperate interest in my fortune. Webb discovered that Williams' construction business was facing bankruptcy due to multiple fraud investigations. Diana had accumulated massive credit card debt maintaining her luxury lifestyle, and Tyler had dropped out of graduate school after accumulating substantial student loans he couldn't repay. My cryptocurrency windfall represented their only hope of avoiding financial ruin. Dr. Peterson's independent neurological evaluations revealed that my cognitive function was recovering at a remarkable rate, contradicting the pessimistic prognosis Dr. Stevens had been filing in my official medical records. Peterson conducted comprehensive tests measuring my brain activity, reflexes, and processing speed, documenting evidence that I was experiencing near-complete neurological recovery despite the traumatic nature of my initial injuries. The corruption scheme Dr. Stevens had orchestrated began unraveling when several nurses reported Diana's bribery attempts to the hospital ethics board. These whistleblowing reports triggered an internal investigation into the authenticity of my medical records and the financial relationships between my family and certain medical staff members. The investigation revealed a pattern of falsified documentation designed to support claims about my mental incompetence. Maria's documentation proved crucial when she provided Nathan's legal team with detailed accounts of conversations she'd witnessed between my family members. Her notes included specific dates, times, and quotes about their inheritance planning, guardianship strategies, and discussions about maintaining control over my assets. This evidence directly contradicted my family's public claims about prioritizing my well-being over financial considerations. Ashley approached Maria during one of her visits, recognizing that the cleaner had developed a unique relationship with me and might have insights into my actual condition. Ashley shared her recordings of Tyler's admissions and her growing concerns about the family's motivations, finding an ally who'd been documenting similar observations about their suspicious behavior. Together, they formed an informal alliance dedicated to exposing the truth about my situation. Dr. Peterson filed a formal complaint with the state medical board about Dr. Stevens' fraudulent documentation practices, presenting evidence that Stevens had been falsifying neurological test results in exchange for financial compensation from my family. This complaint triggered a criminal investigation into medical fraud and corruption that threatened to expose the entire scheme my family had orchestrated to maintain control over my assets. Nathan's legal challenge gained momentum when he presented evidence of my family's abandonment during my coma period contrasted with their sudden devotion following the revelation of my fortune. Hospital security cameras and visitor logs documented months of neglect followed by constant presence, creating an undeniable timeline that exposed their opportunistic motivations. This evidence supported Nathan's argument that my family lacked standing to make decisions about my financial affairs. Jennifer Walsh, my best friend from college who'd been traveling abroad for work, finally learned about my accident through social media posts about my miraculous recovery. Jennifer immediately flew back from London, arriving at the hospital with detailed knowledge about my cryptocurrency project and my actual relationship with my family members. Her testimony would prove crucial in establishing my true mental state and exposing my family's deceptive narrative. Marcus Webb's investigation expanded to include forensic accounting of my family's recent financial activities, revealing that they'd already begun spending money from my accounts through forged signatures and unauthorized access to my credit cards. This evidence of financial theft provided criminal prosecutors with concrete charges to file against my family members, moving beyond civil guardianship disputes into criminal fraud territory. My strategic decision to stage a medical emergency served as the ultimate test of my family's true motivations and provided the evidence needed to expose their deadly intentions. During one of their routine visits when they believed I was unconscious, I triggered what appeared to be a severe seizure episode by controlling my breathing and muscle movements in ways that mimicked neurological distress. The medical emergency alarm brought doctors and nurses rushing to my bedside, creating chaos and urgency around my condition. While medical staff worked to stabilize my fabricated crisis, I listened in horror as my family's immediate response revealed their true priorities. Instead of expressing concern for my well-being, Diana whispered to William about whether this episode might provide justification for ending her suffering through termination of life support. Tyler suggested to Rebecca that a medical emergency might actually be a blessing in disguise, since it would resolve their complicated inheritance situation without requiring them to make difficult legal decisions. Their cold calculation during what they believed was my final crisis provided Ashley with the motivation she needed to expose their schemes publicly. She immediately contacted Nathan's legal team with her recordings of Tyler's admissions and her eyewitness account of the family's response to my medical emergency. Ashley's testimony about their callous reaction to my seizure became crucial evidence in the criminal investigation that was building against them. Nathan filed an emergency injunction to prevent my family from making any medical decisions on my behalf, presenting evidence of their financial motivations and documented neglect during my coma period. His legal team argued that allowing my family to continue controlling my medical care would endanger my life, given their obvious interest in my death rather than recovery. The emergency hearing drew media attention to the case, exposing my family's schemes to public scrutiny.
Dr.
Peterson's report to the Hospital Ethics Board resulted in Dr. Stevens' immediate suspension, pending investigation of his fraudulent medical documentation. Stevens, faced with losing his medical license and potential criminal charges, began cooperating with investigators by providing evidence about Diana's bribery scheme and the extent of the medical fraud conspiracy. His confession implicated several other hospital staff members who'd accepted payments for falsifying my records. Maria's detailed documentation of my family's conversations provided prosecutors with a comprehensive timeline of their conspiracy to exploit my condition for financial gain. Her notes included specific quotes about inheritance planning, guardianship strategies, and their discussions about managing Samantha's assets after gaining legal control over my decision-making. This evidence demonstrated premeditation and conspiracy in their attempts to defraud me of my cryptocurrency fortune. The gallery investigation into Rebecca's art theft expanded when prosecutors discovered she'd forged my signature on numerous sales contracts and kept all profits from artwork she claimed to be selling on behalf of my estate. Rebecca had generated over $50,000 through fraudulent art sales, using my unconscious state to justify her authority as my representative while pocketing all proceeds for her personal use. Tyler's intimidation campaign against Ashley backfired spectacularly when she provided evidence of his threats to Nathan's security team. Tyler had threatened to destroy her reputation and make her life hell if she interfered with the family's plans, creating additional criminal charges for witness intimidation and obstruction of justice. His aggressive behavior toward Ashley demonstrated the lengths my family would go to protect their fraudulent schemes. Diana's extensive bribery network began collapsing when the hospital ethics investigation expanded to include all staff members who'd been involved in my care. Several nurses and medical technicians admitted to accepting cash payments in exchange for supporting false documentation about my cognitive limitations. These confessions revealed the scope of corruption Diana had orchestrated to manipulate my medical records for legal and financial advantage. The legal battle intensified when Nathan's team presented evidence that my family had been accessing my bank accounts through forged signatures and unauthorized electronic transfers. Financial forensics revealed thousands of dollars in fraudulent withdrawals, credit card charges, and asset transfers that had occurred while I was unconscious and unable to authorize or monitor my accounts. This evidence elevated the case from civil disputes to serious criminal fraud charges. Williams' construction business faced additional scrutiny when investigators discovered he'd been using my personal credit lines to cover business debts and payroll obligations. He'd forged loan applications using my name and financial information, assuming that my unconscious state would prevent detection of his fraudulent borrowing. These discoveries added identity theft and loan fraud to the growing list of criminal charges against my family. Jennifer's arrival from London provided crucial testimony about my actual mental state before the accident and my sophisticated understanding of cryptocurrency investments. Her first-hand knowledge of our college project and my technical capabilities contradicted my family's claims that I lacked the cognitive ability to manage complex financial decisions. Jennifer's testimony established that I'd always been highly competent in financial matters and technology. The moment of my dramatic awakening was carefully orchestrated to maximize the impact of exposing my family's betrayal. I waited until all 4 family members were present for one of their staged visits, complete with flowers and fake emotional displays for the benefit of hospital staff. As Diana leaned over my bed delivering another rehearsed speech about family love conquering all obstacles, I opened my eyes fully and spoke my first words in 8 months, stunning them into speechless panic. "I heard everything," I said clearly, my voice stronger than anyone expected after months of silence. "Every conversation, every plan, every lie you told while you thought I was brain dead." The color drained from their faces as they realized their months of scheming had been witnessed by their intended victim. William stumbled backward, knocking over the elaborate flower arrangement Tyler had brought, while Diana's perfectly composed facade crumbled into obvious terror. My methodical confrontation of each family member's specific betrayals was devastating in its precision and detail. I described Rebecca's systematic theft of my artwork and personal belongings, quoting exact amounts she'd received from gallery sales and listing specific pieces she'd stolen from my studio. I recounted Tyler's cruel jokes about having one less mouth to feed, and his research into mental incompetence laws designed to maintain control over my assets, regardless of my recovery. Rebecca's immediate response was to deny everything and claim I was confused from my brain trauma, desperately trying to maintain the narrative of cognitive impairment they'd spent months establishing. However, my detailed knowledge of her specific actions, including dates, amounts, and names of galleries where she'd sold my work, made her denials obviously false. Her panic intensified when I mentioned the forged signatures she'd used on sales contracts. Tyler's relationship with Ashley imploded instantly when I revealed my knowledge of their betrayal and his manipulation tactics. Ashley, who was present during this confrontation, watched in horror as Tyler tried to justify dating my best friend while I lay unconscious, claiming he'd needed emotional support during the family crisis. His attempts to minimize their relationship only highlighted his callous opportunism and complete lack of remorse. Diana's bribery schemes were exposed when I described specific conversations I'd overheard about her payments to Dr. Stevens and other medical staff. I quoted exact dollar amounts she'd offered and detailed the false medical documentation she'd orchestrated to support claims about my mental incompetence. Her sophisticated manipulation of my medical records demonstrated premeditation and criminal intent that went far beyond opportunistic greed. The revelation of my cryptocurrency fortune and Nathan's legal challenge sent my family into complete panic as they realized their schemes had been discovered and documented by multiple witnesses. Nathan arrived during my confrontation, bringing legal documentation that formally revoked any authority my family might have claimed over my financial affairs. The timing of his appearance was perfect, as my family was still reeling from my unexpected awakening. Ashley's recorded confessions of Tyler's admissions about inheritance planning provided prosecutors with irrefutable evidence of my family's criminal conspiracy. The recordings captured Tyler explicitly stating that the family viewed my recovery as an obstacle to accessing my wealth and discussing strategies for maintaining legal control over my assets through fraudulent guardianship proceedings.
Dr.
Stevens' arrest on medical fraud charges triggered a comprehensive investigation into the corruption scheme Diana had orchestrated throughout my hospitalization. Stevens' cooperation with prosecutors led to the discovery of falsified medical records, fraudulent neurological evaluations, and systematic documentation designed to support false claims about my cognitive limitations. His medical license was permanently revoked. The Hospital Ethics Board's investigation expanded to encompass all staff members who'd been involved in the fraudulent documentation scheme Diana had orchestrated. Several nurses, medical technicians, and administrative staff faced disciplinary action or criminal charges for accepting bribes in exchange for supporting false claims about my condition. The scandal prompted comprehensive reforms in hospital oversight procedures. My family's guardianship petition was immediately dismissed when the court learned about their criminal activities and documented neglect during my coma period. The judge expressed outrage at their attempts to exploit my vulnerability for financial gain while claiming to act in my best interests. Their complete lack of legal standing to make decisions about my affairs was formally established through court order. Rebecca's forced return of stolen artwork and apartment belongings provided additional evidence of her systematic theft during my unconsciousness. Gallery records and online sales documentation created an undeniable paper trail of her criminal activity, while her attempts to destroy evidence only added obstruction of justice charges to her growing list of legal problems. The financial damages from her theft exceeded $75,000. William's construction business collapsed when his fraudulent use of my credit and financial information was discovered by investigators. His attempts to cover business debts through identity theft and unauthorized borrowing using my unconscious state added multiple felony charges to his legal troubles. The business faced bankruptcy and closure, destroying his primary source of income and professional reputation. 6 months after my dramatic awakening and the exposure of my family's betrayal, I found myself living a completely transformed life in Denver, Colorado, far from the toxic environment that had nearly destroyed me. My physical recovery exceeded all medical expectations, with only minor lingering effects from the extensive trauma my body had endured. More importantly, my emotional healing had begun through therapy, genuine friendships, and the satisfaction of seeing justice served to those who had betrayed me during my most vulnerable time. The establishment of the Rodriguez Foundation for Abandoned Patients became my primary focus and the most meaningful use of my cryptocurrency fortune. Using $50 million of my $850 million windfall, we created a comprehensive support system for patients whose families had abandoned them during medical crises. The foundation provides legal advocacy, emotional support, and financial assistance to ensure that no one suffers the isolation and vulnerability I experienced during my coma. Maria Santos, the night shift cleaner whose kindness had sustained me through the darkest months, became the foundation's executive director, completely transforming her life through this opportunity. Her natural compassion and first-hand understanding of hospital dynamics made her uniquely qualified to oversee our patient advocacy programs. Maria's annual salary of $200,000 plus comprehensive benefits and housing assistance provided security for her family and recognition of her crucial role in exposing my family's schemes. Ashley's redemption arc proved that genuine remorse and moral courage could overcome past mistakes and rebuild broken trust. After providing crucial testimony that helped convict my family members, Ashley dedicated herself to supporting the Foundation's mission and rebuilding our friendship through consistent actions rather than empty words. Her experience with Tyler taught her valuable lessons about recognizing manipulation and standing up for her principles, even when it meant sacrificing personal comfort. Nathan Cross became both my business partner and romantic companion, though our relationship developed slowly and organically rather than through the dramatic circumstances that brought us together. His integrity throughout the legal battles and respect for my autonomy during my recovery created a foundation of trust that grew into genuine love. Our partnership in expanding Digital Fortress investments has been professionally successful and personally fulfilling. Dr. Peterson's leadership in hospital reform created lasting changes that protect vulnerable patients from the kind of medical manipulation I experienced. His advocacy led to stricter oversight of family involvement in patient care decisions, mandatory training for staff to recognize signs of financial exploitation, and improved protocols for documenting patient interactions. These reforms have already prevented similar abuse cases in hospitals across the state. The legal consequences for my family members reflected the severity of their crimes and provided closure that justice had been served appropriately. Rebecca received 4 years in federal prison for art theft, fraud, and identity theft, with additional civil liability requiring her to pay full restitution for stolen artwork and personal belongings. Her criminal record permanently damaged her professional prospects and social standing. Diana faced the most serious charges due to her leadership role in orchestrating the medical fraud conspiracy and extensive bribery scheme. Her sentence of 8 years in federal prison, plus substantial fines and asset forfeiture, reflected the premeditated nature of her crimes and the vulnerability of her victim. The loss of her luxury lifestyle and social status was particularly devastating for someone who'd built her identity around material success. Tyler's conviction on conspiracy, fraud, and witness intimidation charges resulted in a 5-year prison sentence and permanent damage to his academic and professional future. His graduate school expelled him upon learning about his criminal activities, and his student loans became his responsibility without family financial support. The relationship with Ashley that he'd sacrificed his integrity to pursue ended permanently. Williams' construction business faced complete collapse after his identity theft and fraudulent borrowing using my financial information was exposed. His 6-year prison sentence, combined with bankruptcy and professional licensing revocation, destroyed the career he'd spent decades building. The man who'd raised me from childhood had revealed himself to be capable of exploiting my unconscious state for his personal financial gain. Jennifer Walsh's return from London led to the rekindling of our college friendship and her involvement in expanding the Digital Fortress platform internationally. Her technical expertise and understanding of global cryptocurrency markets made her invaluable in developing new features for our trading algorithm. Our friendship, strengthened by her loyalty during my crisis, became one of the most treasured relationships in my new life. My art career flourished as galleries began displaying my work based on its genuine merit rather than the tragic circumstances Rebecca had exploited during her theft operation. Several major exhibitions featured my digital artwork and paintings, generating both critical acclaim and substantial sales that validated my artistic abilities independent of my cryptocurrency success. The emotional expression in my recent work reflected the depth of trauma and recovery I'd experienced. The Foundation's impact expanded rapidly as we identified hundreds of patients across the country who'd experienced family abandonment during medical crises. Our legal advocacy program successfully challenged inappropriate guardianship petitions, exposed financial exploitation schemes, and ensured that vulnerable patients received proper care regardless of their family situations. The program's success attracted national attention and inspired similar initiatives in other states. My final reflection on this incredible journey centers on the profound lessons about human nature that emerged from my darkest experience. Sometimes losing everything reveals who truly matters in your life, and sometimes the people who abandon you in darkness are actually doing you a favor by showing their true character before you invest more trust in relationships that were fundamentally hollow. I learned that fortune doesn't create character, but rather reveals what was always hidden beneath the surface. Family, I discovered, isn't defined by blood relationships or legal obligations, but by who chooses to stand beside you when you cannot stand for yourself. The people who matter most are those who show kindness without expectation of reward, who maintain loyalty when it costs them something, and who demonstrate integrity when they think no one is watching their choices. What happened to me could happen to anyone, at any time, which is why the Foundation's work remains so crucial and personally meaningful. We've created systems to ensure that vulnerability doesn't automatically lead to exploitation and that medical crises bring out the best in humanity rather than revealing its worst impulses. Through this work, my traumatic experience has been transformed into something that protects and empowers others facing similar betrayals. The cryptocurrency fortune that initially attracted my family's predatory attention ultimately became the tool for creating lasting positive change in the world. Money revealed their true nature and provided the means for justice, healing, and protection for others who might face similar exploitation. The $800 million they coveted so desperately now funds programs that prevent the exact type of abuse they perpetrated against me. Looking forward, I feel profound gratitude for the journey that brought me to this point, even including the darkest months when I thought I might never escape my family's schemes. That experience taught me to recognize genuine relationships, appreciate authentic kindness, and use my resources to make meaningful differences in other people's lives. The woman who woke up from that coma was stronger, wiser, and more purposeful than the one who'd gone to sleep. Have you ever experienced betrayal from someone you trusted completely? How do you think you would handle discovering that your family had ulterior motives for their care and concern? Share your thoughts in the comments below about family loyalty and the difference between genuine love and opportunistic manipulation. If this story resonated with you or taught you something about recognizing authentic relationships, please hit that like button and subscribe for more true stories about overcoming betrayal and finding strength in the darkest moments. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that they can survive family betrayal and build a better life surrounded by people who truly care about their well-being. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes the greatest betrayals lead to the most meaningful discoveries about who deserves your trust and love. Stay strong, stay aware, and never let anyone convince you that you're powerless to change your circumstances.